올 여름 휴가 어디로 떠나고 싶으세요? 휴가철을 맞이하여 밀로우데이 닛산에서 준비한 특별 할인 이벤트를 만나보세요. 국내의 인기 차종 알티마를 선택하세요. 연비가 좋은 센트라를 선택하세요. 로그의 무이자 할부 판매도 가능합니다. 이 밖에 2015년까지 리터당 40센트의 연료비 절약, 자동차 구입비 2달치 면제, 5년에 10만 킬로미터 연장 워런티를 무료로 드립니다. 마이 닛산 마이 초이스, 여러분의 선택입니다.
But the immigration strategy is our response at the ministry and with our government to ensure that Ontario is successful as we move forward to meet three objectives. First, to attract the best and brightest here to the province of Ontario, to make sure that they have the services necessary for them to be successful. And the third thing is to leverage the diversity that immigration brings to our province to ensure that it positions Ontario for success. In addition to that, as you may know, my ministry looks after settlement services and newcomers. We also look after the not-for-profit sector. So we've been working on the partnership project and looking at ways to better connect not-for-profits with the government, and we also look after honors and awards. So making sure that we recognize the citizenship of and the goodwill of Ontarians. So over the last few months, I've had the opportunity to present thousands of awards to Ontarians through the Volunteer Service Awards. And if you don't know this, in Ontario, 6 million people each year volunteer, a total of 850 million hours of volunteer time. So we recognize many of these folks who volunteer their time through our Volunteer Service Awards, and we've given out 10,000 awards across the province at 52 locations in the last few months. So it has been busy, and there's a lot more work to do. We know that there's some challenges that are in front of us in regards to immigration. We know that there's been a lot of change federally that has affected Ontario, and we need to make sure that Ontario understands these changes, how it's going to impact the province, and how we best respond to that. So $85 million, for example, has been cut from settlement services in the province over the last 3 years. We know that the refugee system has changed. We know that dependence has changed, the different classes of immigrants and who has priorities changed. And one of the biggest impact in the province of Ontario is that 10 years ago we had 70% of our immigrants came from a class called the economic class. And over the last 10 years, that number has gone down to 50%. So that's a challenge for Ontario. We know that if we want to make sure Ontario is successful, we need some tools provincially to ensure that we have more control over immigration. And we've been advocating for increased provincial nominee numbers. We're currently at 1,300, but we know provinces like Manitoba and Alberta have 5,000. And in some provinces, 90% of their immigration is self-selected. So we need to make sure that we have those tools, because currently it's about 1% self-selection. And we know that there's skill gaps that exist in Ontario. So for example, if you take the financial sector, which is the second largest financial sector in North America, just behind New York, we know within that sector, the IT professionals, they can't find enough people to fill those roles. The actuaries, same thing. So we need to make sure that our immigration patterns are in sync. The same way we need to make sure our university and college grads for Canadians, who have been here for 5, 10 years or 2 generations, 3 generations, have an opportunity to fill those gaps. So things need to be in sync with each other, and we're hoping that the federal government will work with us and to help find some of those solutions. So obviously, immigration funding is based on numbers, but my argument would be just because you're here for 2 years, 3 years doesn't mean that you're finished using any type of service like strengthening your English, taking a mentorship program, working with someone to figure out how to move to the next stage, maybe from one type of job into another type of job. So I think that type of counseling services for newcomers is it depends on the person as well, right? Sometimes people land here and a week later they're in their dream job. Sometimes people face harsher challenges based on where they're from and some of the challenges they've had back home and how the impact is coming into a new society. So I hope we can balance that out in the future. We've had our bridge training program. If you're not familiar with the program, is taking a foreign trained professional and figuring out how to get that person integrated into their field as soon as possible. So we've invested $240 million into those programs. So almost $250 million over 10 years, 300 programs in total, and over 50,000 people have gone through the programs. And I know that many people from the Korean community have accessed those courses as well. So they are very beneficial, and I know personally a couple of Korean dentists who have come here and have not been able to integrate quickly into and who have gone back home, right? So that's not good. It's not good for the Ontario economy. It's not good for our opportunities as a community that wants a province that wants to strengthen itself. The typical story of a Korean family coming over, it ends up the mother's here with the kids and the father has to go back home just to make money, instead of being able to stay here and, and to use his profession to actually, to take care of his family while so they can stay together. There's too many times we see people go back home because they know that it's easier for them to interact with the economy. We need to figure out ways to stop that. Just to be clear, Ontario is still the #1 destination for immigrants in Ontario, in Canada, at 40%. But again, we're competing against provinces that have mechanisms and tools that exceed our ability, like the PNP program, the Provincial Nominee Program, where they can, self-select. Alberta and Manitoba are at 5,000 self-selection. We're at 1,300, and we need to figure out a way to change that. So Ontario has the ability to have more control over who's coming into the province. We need to make sure Ontario is set up for success, and self-selection is part of that. I had a fantastic experience in Korea for almost 3 years in Daegu, and I always like to say my experience was a perfect experience. The people of South Korea are very generous people. They have a beautiful culture that's long and is a beautiful culture that's influential, obviously in the peninsula, but also in the region, and it was just a great experience for me, seeing the historic ruins in Gyeongju and the port and the fish market in Busan, to the industry and the growth and the in Seoul, and seeing it's just a fascinating country, right? And I think the story of the Korean people over the last 50 years, 60 years is one of the most successful stories on the planet, right? Going from a very challenged economy after a war to the 10th strongest economy on the planet. So employers, entrepreneurs, and champions who work for the success of newcomers in Ontario. So like, for example, in my community, Mr. Min, who runs the Galleria Mall, is a great community leader, right? Like he does a lot to support not only the Korean community, but they do a lot of work to support newcomers and They provide. I went to the kimchi fest where we made kimchi and sent it off to organizations where people may not be as affluent as as the average citizen. So I see great newcomers doing great things in our province, and it's important that we recognize not only people it's important that we recognize all people, including people from the Korean diaspora. It's so if you can get those messages out, and we do, and we'll get that information for you. But it's important, we have, and I can, if you go to our website, ontario.ca, there's honors and awards button. We have a lot of awards that are out there for community groups to nominate people. So, for example, the Volunteer Service Awards. Any organization can recommend a name for people who have contributed some volunteer time to an organization, and we go by the honor code. So if an organization like the Korean Cultural Center says that Michael has donated 5 years of time, we will recognize that as a government. And it's important that, especially with the young people in the Korean community, that we recognize their contribution and recognize, because it's good on their resumes, it's good, it's good for their self-esteem. But if you can let your readers know that, if you're part of a cultural group, if you're part of a, community group, get there onto the website and start recognizing your volunteers so we can recognize them. And in return, we can celebrate citizenship in this province.